the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity. Tomorrow never certain. What dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons will breach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest and the righteous in your corners.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. U.S. inflation rate spikes to 8.9%. That is the biggest spike, the biggest year-over-year increase since 1981, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, and we're going to be talking about this. What does this mean? Again, the average price of a basket of goods having to do with food and energy costs and what have you, increased year-over-year by 8.9%. Greatest increase since 1981. Generational type figures. Okay, what does this mean? Is this normal? Is it inevitable? How do we position ourselves such that we are on the benefiting end of this thing called fiat inflation and not on the detrimental side of the stick? Whatever I'm trying to say, right? Let's get one thing out of the way, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ike. This is my channel. Click that like button, click that subscribe button if you have not already, and hit the bell button twice. Hit the bell button twice. Again, okay, so we're talking about inflation and what exactly it means. Remember the trillions of dollars that were printed in beginning around 2020. I believe in 2020, about 20% of the dollars in circulation up until that time was created in 2020. So think about it. Like all the dollars that has ever been created, okay, about a fifth of it was just created, boom, in 1 year since they started creating dollars. Okay, now that's kind of crazy. Now what happens? Obviously, high supply of the dollars leads to a devaluation of the dollars, and this is what you call inflation. But here's the crazy part, and I know I'm saying a mouthful, but we'll take it piece by piece as we continue here. But the crazy part is this. The people that suffer from the inflation tax, if you will, it is the lower 50% of the economic ladder because they don't have assets, okay? They suffer not just because they have to transact in cash and they have to scrape by to get the food money, the gas money, and all these other kinds of monies, which they're always needing, but also because they transact mainly in cash, and cash is what is getting devalued. The people who have assets are seeing the value of their assets going up. They're like, oh yeah, this is nice. 8.9%. You say 8.9%. All right. So that's the idea is, look, on the one hand, the government is giving these people money, printing the money, giving it to them. On the other hand, it is taking it away from them and using it to inflate the assets of the elites. So goes this story, right? So where do you want to be? You want to be somebody that holds assets and not. But anyways, how's it going? How's it going, sir? How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm not doing bad at all. So we're gonna get started this way. Since we're talking about inflation, okay, and we're talking about money. Let me ask you this: what is money? Now that's a trick. That's the kind of question where it's like somebody asks you, like, define walking, and then you're like, whoa. So things that are kind of just that we take for granted, we tend not to have ready definitions for. But what is money? Pick your what comes to mind.
Well, I think the first thing, and I speak for a lot of people, when you say money, they think of cash, right? That's the first thing. And money is also possibilities. Money allows you to acquire property and assets that you mentioned. Money is what is the drug that we're, the 9-to-5ers, that's the drug, right? So money helps pay the bills. Money helps fulfill our, wants and needs. Money helps us. It separates classes from each other. When you talked about the 50%, or sometimes, we'll say the 1% of the 1%. They're all separated by money. Of course, money starts to become wealth as you, depending on which side of the scale you're on, right? The upper, the richer and the rich, the 10, 20%, the smaller one, the smaller number, their money has turned into wealth, especially long-term wealth, generational wealth in some cases, like, Rockefeller and Westfield, names like that. But money is what moves the world. Money is what solves a lot of problems. Money gets you things that nothing else can. So we can go on and on, but I think I can end my thoughts by saying money rules the world. Right.
All right. So you've given it a nice little introduction, as though it was some kind of money was about to come give a speech, and you're like, hey, money is this, money is that,
that's
blah,
right,
blah, blah, and money rules the world, mic drop. And then he comes and he gives a speech. Okay, cool.
That's right.
But then if I were to ask you again, I would say, okay, define money. Okay, you've said all the things that it does. It separates the classes. It can get you,
right.
it can blah, blah, blah. But I want to say, well, give me one sentence, maximum two, of what is this guy money that you're talking about?
I think money is the value that we've given a piece of paper to give us options. Really, that's my definition of money.
Okay, so you say options,
right?
So that means you're going to go out there into a marketplace and you're going to choose something,
right?
And the means of exchange so far is what has been highlighted by your descriptions, right?
That's right.
In other words, you're given a means of exchange type of
right. So we can, like earlier, I paid for someone to wash my car. Gave them money, and they did. And took my son to get some toys. I gave some money to Target and walked out the store with some toys. So
there was energy and time spent by the person washing your car, energy and time spent by the person designing and building your toy, right? And then you give them money, which in exchange, typically you have to do some energy and time things typically in order to get as well. So there's this exchange of energy and time, which you will need regardless as a biological being in the social system, right? You're gonna need to be doing this exchanging of money and time. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are having this conversation about inflation because, again, 8.5% this year as of 6:51 a.m. on April 12th. Okay, these are the numbers. 8.5%, sharpest year-over-year increase since 1981. Wow. How does one deal with it? Okay, and Bloomberg and other people, somebody literally said, they should eat more lentils and take the bus. That's the way to solve the problem. Okay, not go get assets or not question the idea fundamentally about fiat currency inflation. So we're gonna first start here before we play certain videos. Okay, we're gonna first start at this level of understanding money. So let me try this on you. Let me try a story. This is my money story to explain money. Typically, is because we're asking what this money thing is. It's a human technology that we kind of use to exchange this energy thing that we discussed, right? But the story of money is this, okay? Let's say you imagine ourselves in an island. Okay, you, me, and a few other people in an island. And we have to produce different things, obviously. So you grow oranges, right? And I raise sheep, okay? Now, I want some oranges from you, but you don't want any sheep, right? This is called the double coincidence of wants, right? The double coincidence of wants is this problem whereby we have to barter, we have to exchange out the results, the fruits of our labor, if you will. But you don't want the fruits of my labor. You don't want no sheep right now, right? But I want oranges. What do I do? Okay. Then we say, you know what? Magically in this island, we have cell phones, okay? So you know what? Cell phone minutes are something you use, something I use, right? Cell phone minutes are easily transferable. Like, okay, cool. So how many cell phone minutes, okay, for your oranges? And you tell me, okay, a bushel of oranges or whatever cost 100 cell phone minutes. And then I give you a cell phone minutes. That is money, right? In other words, this is how money comes to, wherever money has come to be, wherever in the world, this kind of story happened, where I want something, but you don't want what I'm offering. The double coincidence of want, so we cannot barter. And then we say, we're going to use this other thing, okay? Salt, calorie, gold, for example. Okay, let's come to gold, because gold is the one that many people kind of came to agreement on, okay? Gold, therefore, is not that thing that we'll just use to carry around, and I don't have to worry about whether you want sheep when I want oranges. I'm a sheep guy. I just do sheep, get gold. Okay, that sounds a little weird that I do sheep and get gold. But anyways, I get gold and then I transact with you. So that's the story of money, right? But then fiat, what is fiat currency then? Fiat currency, let me stop. That is money. And then what is currency? Currency is, I can't just be carrying gold around, shaving it, right, to give you, in order to buy oranges.
Melting
so
it.
Let's say we continue the story and you're like, okay, gold is the standard, right? Because cell phone minutes is easy, it's digitized and everything. This is like, but it's a good way to tell the story to end it real quickly. But if you start with gold, you're going to see that there's problems, right? Like, how do I, so people, when they say, what is money? They give properties of money. Okay, I just want to enumerate them quickly. But the properties come from the fact that it is let me put it this way. They say money has to be fungible, meaning your ounce of gold and my ounce of gold, there's no difference. We can exchange 1 ounce of gold for 1 ounce of gold. Same thing with cell phone minutes, or same thing with dollars. Hey, here's $1, you give me $1. It's like, you don't care, right? $1 is $1. An ounce of gold is an ounce of gold is an ounce of gold. A minute is a minute is a minute. So that's a typical property of money, is that this kind of fungibility. And divisibility is also, you can divide cell phone minutes, you can divide dollars into cents, you can shave down the gold, right? But how do we make it fluid? How do we transmit it? Okay, that's where currency comes in. Currency is like this piece of paper, right? That I say, I owe you gold, rather than having to carry gold around, right? I owe you with this piece of paper, okay, and then we do that. But then fiat currency is when that paper can just be created by fiat, if you will, which is by decree of some central bank. So that's the story from money, then currency, and then fiat currency, okay, which makes it such that somebody can just say, let's randomly create 50 more pounds of gold.
Let's just smelt some more gold.
Which is not possible.
Right.
Because you have to create gold in stars. Okay, you have to do certain. The money cannot be like air. That's another property of money, right? It can't just be something that you just get from anywhere, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know. What do you think about my money story? That's basically what money is, right? From money down to fiat.
I think it puts everything into perspective, because it's an exchange, that it's a value system that we've created in exchange for my blood, sweat, and tears. I get this, and the cycle continues. So in exchange for your sweat, the cycle goes on and on. So at some point, if we're doing that, then the economy or any system that has that going, we say it's a booming economy, because there's purchasing, there's spending, the money's coming back in. But if we're bringing out of thin air, then Houston, we have a problem, right?
Indeed. So is fiat currency inflation just an inevitable thing? Before we get to the fact that, hey, you know what you want to be is the person that has the assets. Okay,
that's right.
So when something is inflating, guess what? The price of something is going up. Oh, well, you just have to be the person holding that something that's going up. Okay. If you're going to say, well, it's inevitable and central banks did this, that, the other, or at least for our time and blah, 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 then you need to know where you have to be in order to kind of solve the problem. And it's not about lentils. It's about assets. And by the way, assets is not just your house. Asset means something that pays you, typically, which your house doesn't. But that's a different conversation, that people tend to think that their house is an asset. But you have to live somewhere, right? So your house is not an asset.
It is.
You gotta live, so it's an expense no matter what. Okay. So, but a business is an asset, okay, because it can pay you. And also you do have that knob on inflation in terms of the business as well. But anyways, we're going to play a little clip here by Mr. Breed Love, I believe his name is, but he is on the Artificial Intelligence podcast with Lex Friedman. And he is going to highlight this point, which we just talked about, which is that fiat currency inflation is a way of siphoning money out of you somehow, or pretty much taking away the value of your gold. If I have a special gold machine and I could just increase the supply of gold at will,
print gold,
then I'm stealing your gold, right? But anyways, that's another way to put it. But let's play this real quick.
So we get deeper into that. About inflation is a term that we've been conditioned to think today is just something normal. The prices just go up, and then it's pertinent to a healthy economy, but it's actually if you look at it from real first principles, it is just theft integrated into the money. It's a technology backdoor is another way to think about it. You wouldn't buy a cell phone knowing that someone could siphon your data off your private calls and sell it into the market. Now, I know we do that with a lot of social media stuff today, and that's something else we can get into, but you wouldn't do it willingly, right? You wouldn't. You prefer that your cell phone and your data was monetized by you, or if you're going to sell it, you would be able to selectively sell it. Inflation is that. It's similar. It's a tech backdoor. So it's a money that only a few people can siphon value off of surreptitiously, typically slowly, but eventually, as we've seen throughout history, that slowly builds up into a rapidly and then causes the monetary system to collapse.
Do you think there's a benefit to inflation? Possibly. So when you have perfect information, perhaps you don't need inflation. Perhaps it is purely theft. But I think of inflation as like the snooze button on the alarm. Like you just, so if you have a hard standard, you better wake up when the alarm rings. But all of us kind of like probably shouldn't, but use the snooze button. It's like, okay, well, 5 more minutes or 10 more minutes. And then you're saying there's naturally a slippery slope where it becomes a.
Shout out to Lex Friedman. I like that analogy. The snooze button. What do you think about that one? Like inflation is like, go ahead.
No, I think that he put it in a way that we can all relate. Anyone listening to this, at some point you've utilized the snooze button, but it's a way of snoozing the economy, and someone's going to benefit from it, right? As you mentioned in the opening.
We'll figure this one out later,
right?
Let's just we'll grow our way out of it. We'll innovate our way out of it. We'll sell more next year. We'll I don't know, my kid who's a genius will have the brilliant idea which will save us next year. We can often understand this in terms of our personal economy, right? Inflation is like credit. It's like taking a loan.
Right. And saying that we'll pay the interest later. We'll deal with that later.
All right. Shout out, ladies and gentlemen. We're continuing this fair use
drug that you fall in love with and you abuse. Right. But nevertheless, the usefulness of the snooze button is that you don't know how you'll be actually feeling when the alarm rings. You might be able to ready to pop up. It might be like you really need those few more minutes, like to psychologically get yourself out of bed. This metaphor is just not working at all. But no. But do you think there's a use to inflation sometimes from like an economics perspective?
I think the drug metaphor is a little more apt in that inflation does provide an immediately stimulative effect when used early on. So
it is called stimulus.
Right.
But what it's doing is again, we talk about the balance.
Yeah, and if you want to jump in at any point while I play this, just feel free to.
Oh yeah, sure.
Between incentives and disincentives, right? That being necessary for a system to function properly. With inflation, you're essentially giving the people that can print money a way to dampen the disincentives they face. So it destroys feedback loops, I guess you might say. And another way to look at this is using inflation, using quantitative easing, you can decrease short-term volatility in the marketplace. So the market is basically this form of free exchange that's trying to zero in on the best ideas. And the ideas are those that are most fit to reality, to satisfying the most wants. It's going to overshoot, it's going to undershoot. You have these little business cycles. But when it's undershooting and you're experiencing business recession, in a capitalist environment, the market needs to clear that malinvestment, that misallocation of capital. That means someone made a bet on a certain idea that it would satisfy one.
Okay, so basically inflation is like throwing good money after bad. Inflation is basically like sweeping it under the rug. And then, but at some point you got to go under that rug and take out the crap, right?
After a while, it's going to pile up on you.
After a while, the crap is piling up on you, the wrong information, the malappropriation of funds, because things are going wrong. In other words, basically saying, look, okay, we all know the market, right? Which is another term we have to talk about. We talked about money. We talked about fiat, money, currency, now fiat currency, and then the inflation of fiat currency. And this idea of hiding things under the rug, okay, and what the market is trying to do is one thing I would like to say one word about, which is what is the market? The market is basically this massive computer, distributed computer, okay, that is trying to calculate what the perfect price is for every kind of value and every kind of thing you're doing. You're dancing over there. What does it cost? You're going to dig some graphite over there. What does it cost?
What does it cost? Right.
You want to chop down a piece of wood, a pound of wood. What does it cost? Like, so basically it's trying to calculate this stuff, and the information is distributed, meaning no one person knows what the price is, because every individual is like valuing pencils or valuing dancing more or less as time goes on, right? Or whatever it may be. So it's this kind of crazy computer, and the computer overshoots sometimes. Like, oh, I need more. Oh, everybody wants more lead. Okay, and then it's like, oh crap, we that's not what they
messed up,
want,
right? We
and
gotta
then
bring- yeah.
it goes down again, and hence you go through this cycle. Like any kind of iterative process where you're trying to figure something out and you're bumping on the walls, you're gonna do this kind of a dance, right? And so that's kind of what the market is. But then inflation allows you to just kind of like add a little bit of like extra juice or hit the snooze button or whatever it may be. I don't know. Any comments so far on this? Our understanding here of inflation before we get to how one deals with it and whatnot.
Yeah, I think the all of the analogies, you know, snooze button and drug, they all lead to the same thing. It's a stimulus. It's a temporary satisfaction, right? Of, oh, everything is going well. It's saying that, oh, there's no need. We could just take water from the pool and bring it in here and we'll be okay. You know, not keeping in mind that we have to filter the water. It brings a moment of satisfaction. And I think that as we dig deeper into the topic, we're going to understand, you know, the next parts of it, how it affects and how we recover and things like that. And I think that what's often misunderstood with inflation is it takes time, right? It's just going to take a lot of time to fix that domino effect that the economy has to recover from.
100%. Okay, let's continue.
Wants in a particular way, and that bet did not pan out. If you then paper over the losses that business is creating, you're now delaying and exacerbating the volatility that idea created. So this is kind of a Talebian concept where you can dampen short-run volatility, but volatility is truth. Volatility is us matching our ideas to reality, right? We're constantly, again, overshooting and undershooting. So you delay volatility, you're just amplifying it and exacerbating it in the long run. And that's what central bank is doing. The central bank mandate is low unemployment and low and expected inflation, basically. And so they're trying to achieve economic growth in a stable way, quote unquote stable way. This is their ostensible purpose. And that's just not possible. Growth is an inherently unstable process.
Inherently unstable, we encounter this typical problem of centralization versus decentralization, right? The idea that we should control things versus the idea that maybe we should just let the natural, quote unquote, natural flow of things happen. And natural meaning things happen of their own accord, and there is a wisdom in things happening of their own accord. And we know how things happen when they happen of their own accord, okay? They look like what you call evolution or an ecosystem or whatever. In other words, it's kind of messy, right? You know, a few generations have to die, and then you figure something out, and we don't like that. And and it's not crazy that we don't like that. we want to reduce uncertainty. Generally speaking, is so. A word on this, and then we'll go into Nassim Taleb. I'm sorry, not Nassim Taleb, but Andrew Henderson here, talking about the article that tells you to go eat lentils. Okay, the solution to the problem which we've
As
just been
inflation
discussing
continues to roar, thanks in large part to politicians and
pause that. The solution to the problem is lentils, and less beef, more lentils. All that Wagyu stuff you're trying to get, chill. Stop it. It's not for you. It's for someone else. But anyways, this idea of trying to remove uncertainty and then going about doing it in the wrong ways is one example of it I came across recently. I don't you want to see what you think about this.
Mm-hmm.
So think about Ritalin and ADHD in the school system, especially when it comes to boys. So you have these things called boys. You've known them since forever, okay? And they're kind of like a natural occurrence, okay? Boys are natural, right? Okay, cool. Boys are natural. And they kind of do what boys do, which is not want to sit when you tell them to sit for long periods of time and do this.
Always full of energy, and I have three of them.
All
so
that you have three boys, so you know this natural thing called boys.
Yes.
Then you have a school system, which is some kind of a construct you're trying to build.
That's designed
That's how
for
human
girls.
beings are. Well, it's designed for our convenience.
Right.
So basically it means I want them to sit down, okay, and
just
be
quiet.
Be quiet, okay? And then anyone that deviates from that, rather than change my unnatural system, I put drugs into the natural system or whatever, or I mess things up, blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. That is the idea there. Now it just so turns out that girls conveniently or the psychological temperament of girls is it works with what the institution wants, right? Basically. Want them to sit down, they sit down. Okay, fine. I don't have to do anything with these ones. But what do you think about this idea that this is not atypical? In other words, that we do this kind of crazy thing where rather than change something that we've constructed, we would rather inject people or put drugs in people or invent diseases and all these kinds of craziness.
I mean, okay. Well, if we're talking about inventing diseases, I mean, some people can say, well, there's no proof that that's happening, right? It's all speculation. It's all theory. It's all, what's the word? There's a word it's all, I can't think of the word, but as far as what we must look at, we're in the situation that we're in, you know, speaking of inflation, the economy. Can we say that because of COVID, and can we argue that COVID was brought about to create this mess, right? Because the inflation has started, you could trace it back. I mean, we saw this coming. You know, you look at, you know, auto companies, you know, production chip shortages, the workforce was affected, and we know that the energy and the exchange produces the money, and we saw that take a hit, and we saw stimulus checks being put in the economy. We saw people spending. There was a record number of people buying homes, record number of people looking for cars, record number of people, you know, even people renting property to, you know, because like you said, people have to stay somewhere. So when you look at all of that, I mean, did we see this coming? I mean, can we argue that to some degree this was going to happen? We can see this coming because of how poorly the economy was performing during the 2-year hiatus, if you will, sitting at home.
Yeah, we can see it coming, but it seems like we'd rather have a temporary false sense of certainty, right? Even if, for example, if I go back to my Ritalin idea, even if we know we're going to screw up the kids' lives, okay, but at least the school system can sit and be quiet, right? For you know, the kids will be fine, right? Or inflation will take care of itself. It's the same kind of thing where you're trying to remove uncertainty and chaos from a system, okay?
Right.
And you're like, I don't want to trust the business markets, the boom and bust of the business market, or I don't want to trust in the rambunctiousness of young boys. Hence, I'll give him Ritalin, or I'll do the inflation thing, which we have used that drug analogy for before anyway. So, anyways.
Yeah, no, I think that I think as humans, it's always, I think we're limited with how far we can see, and we can start the argument that the ones that are in charge, the ones that are making decisions, have limited vision or limited perspectives, not thinking long term. Because I believe a society that is run, I mean, look at our president. Our president is, you know, what I'd like to call a grandpa. Somebody should be retired. He thinks the next thing for him is, you know, when they lay me down to sleep. You look at our generation, we're not thinking like that. We're thinking of air pollution. We're thinking of, you know, sustainability, longevity. We have these thoughts and these concerns because we still have, you know, another 40, 50 years. You know, of course, I'm just making that number up. But my point is, could it be because the people making those decisions have short-term mentality because of their age and life experience, and some of these are, you know, World War II veterans. So their mindset and their approach to things aren't thinking enough to consider the children or thinking about 20, 30 years from now, because we know 20, 30 years from now, Biden would be, safe to say, we should be unable to do anything. So
the generational issue that you bring up is quite apt, especially, you know, if you want to particularize it to this particular time. So that human, with the story of human foolishness is age-old story, right? But if you want to talk about how it is crystallized in this particular time with regards to the ruling generation, and that, you know, we call them baby boomers. They're the biggest generation. They're a massive generation, number one.
Right.
And they're also I don't know if you knew this about baby boomers, but they're the wealthiest group of human beings that has ever existed. It's not crazy to imagine that the wealthiest group of human beings that ever existed, because America is way wealthier than Rome ever was. Take, for example, that kind of a thing, right?
Right.
So the wealthiest generation, which we know because everyone started getting broker. You and I know, it's our, like around our generation, Generation X, and then our generation, we all started getting broker, right? So that was the peak. Okay, they came around right in the peak, and they're the spoiled brats. They did the whole 60s thing. Okay, so there's this very special group of people that they're now ruling. Okay, one thing that to note about them is they're the oldest people that have held power. In other words, we've never dealt with this whole 80-year-old president type crap before. You know, like,
wow.
They have, and this is not just presidents. You can look at financial
Senators.
institutions and
Right.
Senators outside of government, out in the private industry, in the private sector as well. They hold power. They've
Right.
held power for a long time. You're the wealthiest generation that has ever existed, a particularly big generation, and a strange generation in the sense that they're like the spoiled brats. They literally are the spoiled, rich, spoiled brats that are ruling us right now. And obviously, they're going to be going to act in certain ways that benefit their particular interests,
Right.
right now. And so I think that is an apt point. So Andrew Anderson here, Nomad Capitalist, we're going to share this video, and he's going to talk about, okay, what people are saying you should do in order to deal with inflation. We've understood what money is, and we've understood, okay, fiat currency gets inflated. We've talked about, hey, maybe you need to get assets. But let's see what others have to say.
As inflation continues to roar, thanks in large part to politicians' incompetence, the Western media has a refreshingly honest take. Let them eat cake. I'm going to tell you all about how to survive inflation and why these comments from the Western media just don't make sense. I'm Andrew Henderson. This is Nomad Capitalist, where we've helped everyone from multiple billionaires to celebrities to 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors who want to legally go where you're treated best. And I'm going to
just a comment on here, a little entrepreneur type comment. So I noticed, so this is a guy, he has a business outside of YouTube. Obviously, like his business is in this. Well, how do you move your business internationally? How do you get in, different kinds of citizenships, passports, residencies, different bank accounts, and all this kind of stuff? So it's in there. And then both the YouTube and his business, all those stuff is related. Maybe a few conferences here and there. All you get the picture. Okay, that's the business he's in. So just something I wanted to point out to you is, before he used to say, when he first started, like back in the day, he was like, we help 6-figure entrepreneurs do X, Y, and Z. That was part of his spiel, okay? And then later he started saying, we help, I think he started out with just like high net worth individuals. First he said 6 figures, then it was like high net worth individuals. Then it was like, okay, 6 and 7 figure. Now I think he only just says 7 and 8. So it's kind of interesting to see his change in his marketing on like, I'm just going to be like, hey, I'm sure, okay, no shade to this guy, but I'm sure before he ever got any 7-figure clients, he started saying, we know the game.
He was.
We help 7-figure.
We say be bigger.
And 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors who want to lead.
Well, let me see. Is it 7 and 8 now? Okay,
he said 7 and 8.
I'm Andrew Henderson. This is Nomad Capitalist, where we've helped everyone from multiple billionaires to celebrities to 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors who want to legally go where you're treated best. And I'm going to give you the summary of an article that went viral on social media. It's from Bloomberg Opinion, talking about inflation, how to deal with inflation. I'm going to give you my thoughts on how I would deal with inflation in a moment, but here it is from Bloomberg directly. This is refreshingly honest. Inflation stings most if you earn less than $300,000. And
wow. You don't say. What do you have to say about that? The first statement so far, okay? Bloomberg is telling us that if you earn, go ahead.
No, he's just separate right away. He's just saying, look, before you say anything, if you're not here, don't even, this doesn't apply to you, right? So he's speaking to what, 50% of the population?
Okay, so basically, here's the thing. The percentage of people who make over 6 figures, let's say it's the percentage of men that make over 6 figures, and it's going to be much lower for women. In the United States, it's about 10%. Okay, that's just 6 figures. 6 figures mean 100,000, right? So between 100 and 999, right? That's like a 10% thing. Okay, so, and as we know, these things tend to get like steeper as you get closer. So the percentage that makes 300 and above, probably talking about like 5% of people, right? So for 95% of people, inflation stings. So he's not talking to 50%. He's talking to 95%, but there's a 5% for which it's not an issue, right?
Okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah. I think what I meant by that is he was really trying to separate as quickly as he could his audience, right? In other words, as you're referring to, as you're listening to this, you might not notice what's going on, but or there's some people that might hear this and say, this totally applies to me.
Correctly. This is refreshingly honest. Inflation stings most if you earn less than $300,000. And anywhere in the world you go, the average person makes a lot less than $300,000. Here's how to deal. Number 1, take the bus. Number 2, don't buy in bulk. Number 3, try lentils instead of meat. Number 4, nobody said this would be fun.
What do you have to say about this list so far?
I mean, well, here's the thing. I mean, humans are creatures of habits, right? We eat meat because that's what we've been eating. We drive because the bus is inconvenient, and we like things too easy. I mean, our desire to have an easier life has led to an incredible amount of innovation, whether it's social networking, smartphones, computers, even DoorDash. I mean, DoorDash and all those delivery services saw a record number of profits during the pandemic because we love easy, we love convenient. So he's pretty much speaking to every point that we've worked hard as a human species to fix or to make, to work for us. So that's going to be interesting what the rest of this is, And then of course buying in bulk. I mean,
he said don't buy in bulk, which is well, he's reading from the list that says don't buy in bulk, which is an interesting one.
Yeah, and if you look at, I heard Costco and Sam's Club, the two leading bulk retailers, saw record profits during the pandemic because everyone really preferred to buy in bulk. Again, given that fear and uncertainty, so bulk purchases was on a rise.
Why do you think he said, they're saying, because it's a magazine. Okay, so imagine now, because let's kind of paint it a little bit, okay? This is, I believe, Bloomberg, okay? They're kind of put themselves in the position of someone like, let's say, the elite, so the voice of the elite, in other words, the adults in the room, okay? So whenever they give you a message, okay? Whenever your parents are giving you, for example, a message or telling you something, you always got to think, okay, there's facts, and then there's also the fact that they're parents, that they have an end, they have a goal, they have something that they're trying to do here, okay? So for Bloomberg to say, don't buy in bulk, here's what I'm thinking, okay? It's basically getting you out of the idea that you're actually going to have, that your cash is basically, the idea is you're going to be living from paycheck to paycheck. Oh, F that, you're going to be living from half paycheck to half paycheck now, okay? Don't think that you can just buy in bulk. No, you're going to need to wait on the next paycheck for you to get that next little, in other words, it is not that, obviously buying in bulk gives you the economies of scale, makes it less, expensive, right? So basically it's more telling you, look, just get used to not having money. It's not really helping you with that's all I hear. You can tell me what you hear from that, because why would you say don't buy in bulk? All it tells me is, hey, just get used to not having enough money to buy in bulk.
Yeah, I think I read it different. I'm hearing it differently. Don't buy in bulk, meaning that we talked about this a couple of weeks back. Scaling, right? Just when I spent about 2 weeks in Europe, you go to the grocery store to buy the egg that you're going to eat.
Yeah.
And you buy the drink that you're going to drink. We didn't buy anything and left it in the fridge.
Remember Fresh and Easy? It's a store chain. It's no longer here, right?
Right, because that didn't work.
Fresh and Easy was trying to do that European model of here's small little packets of food. And as a matter of fact, I didn't mind it, okay? Because in certain regards, I'm a yuppie, right? I go and I want they have the special lamb and the whatever, like, so I'm like, I'm gonna go there, and get the special lamb. They have snails or like this, things like Fresh and Easy, and anyways. But it didn't match the American behavioral pattern, which is to shop in bulk. And the truth is, Fresh and Easy was not cheap. Okay.
Right.
So it's like saying, I don't get it. It's almost like, okay, they don't have money. They're telling them don't do this thing because it's convenient for us. But then but it's more expensive to not buy.
It is more expensive. And if anything, if we're taking our current gas prices right now, and you're trying to live a lifestyle of not buying in bulk, you're going to spend probably more money on gas, going back and forth, buying things, as I mentioned, scaling your household needs, right?
So basically, don't tie up your money, D says. Okay, so all that stuff is being said. But so far on this list, now maybe it's a stretch goal, okay? But the goal of getting assets or moving away from fiat currency that is getting inflated away has not been mentioned at all. It's okay, take the bus, eat lentils, and don't buy in bulk, and it's not going to be easy, which is basically the list of 4 things that they gave. And we had already looked at the nature of money, currency, fiat currency, and inflation, and we've seen, hey, if insofar as you're going to be in this kind of a system with central banks, it is better to put your money, your value, in a place where when the inflation happens, your value actually rises. Your home value is going up. The value of your business or whatever is going up. You're the one benefiting from all this inflation, right? But this is not said at all. Now, why do you think that people do this? Now, one possible answer is, okay, they don't think people are up to. Do you think it's because really channels like Bloomberg don't really think people are up to like thinking clearly and then doing the work required to actually go after assets, for example.
Right.
Which, by the way, it's not necessarily easy to do. Maybe you have to go after assets in Ghana. Maybe you have to buy land in some place that you know a road is going to, which is something I did, for example.
Right.
There's a road going somewhere. There's a railroad getting built. I think something's going to be interesting there in the next 10 years. You go buy land. It's me taking money, fiat right now, throwing it into an asset because I know that that'll rise and then beat inflation. But do you think that the reason this advice is not given is because they don't just think people are smart enough to do that?
I think people live in a state of fear, and fear is used to control a lot of people. So again, I mentioned earlier, we're creatures of habits. We do everything on a habit. This is just the way we do. We follow these patterns. You know, there's a trigger, there's a pattern, there's a reward system, and our reward system has been especially in the United States economy and culture, has been get it now, do it now, go here and you get it. So we're so used to getting things on demand. And I think when they make statements like these, it's almost a way of saying, just be quiet and live with it, because really they know that no one's going to do it. You know, I tell people all the time, it's not an absence of gym memberships, or rather, excuse me, it's not an absence of gyms. It's not an absence of athletic clothing. It's not an absence of gym equipment, treadmills or weight sets at your local retail stores. It's the mentality that's always, at risk here of being either not, strengthened enough through, you want to call education, exposure, network, influence. But I think they say things like this to say, just be quiet, because no one's going to start eating lentils. No one's going to not buy bulk, because that's the American way. And no one's going to, follow these things you're talking about.
Yeah, no one's either they're not gonna eat lentils now, nor are they gonna get assets or buy land in Ghana, or try to maybe, how about if I diversify into maybe cryptocurrencies, for example? Okay, if I dollar cost average $10 a week or $5 a week into some kind of maybe stable coins that will maintain their value, and so on and so forth. But ladies and gentlemen, again, 8.9% as of April 2022. The sharpest increase, in inflation, the sharpest spike in price increase of this common basket of goods since 1981. Okay,
that's incredible.
Now let's say some. Let's make a statement before we continue with what Forbes is saying here, or Bloomberg is saying you should do about it. Is the inflation number itself, that 8.5%? Obviously has all kinds of problems with it, right? I say obviously because of course it's an official number, right? Meaning there's a whole bunch of fine print. Like it's a given, right? This is not even conspiracy theory stuff or whatever, right? So I mean, we always know that when you get a number like that, it's like, okay, what's the fine print behind it? Here's one part of the fine print, okay? There's this thing called the basket of goods that they actually measure the price of, because it's like, what do you mean 8.9%? 8.9%, does it mean my car went up 8.9% or my house went up 8.9%? Obviously, it's a collection of goods, and they take it for, let's say, the average person who has to eat and buy gasoline and pay certain utilities. So it's those kinds of common goods, okay? This is not the inflation of boats or penthouses. There's very different inflation rates, and that's why, by the way, when you get over that 300,000 level, it's not just because also number one, you have assets, and number two, the inflation numbers over there, very different things going on there, right? It's different things going on there. So here's the thing: that basket of goods that they're measuring, they actually change it over time, not just because the goods obviously change, but because they say, hey, you know what? You used to need 8 potatoes, in 1970. But we're going to reduce it to 4 because of certain things. They'll say things like, maybe the nutritional value of the potatoes has gone up, or the XYZ. In other words, it's called a hedonic, meaning hedonism means it's a thing of a consumption. So they're changing the consumption patterns. They're actually, we need to see, maybe you don't need this much of this in 2020 as you used to need before. Or, you know what? You have a cell phone, and it has made your life a whole lot better, communication, all that stuff. So the fact that you're actually a lot broker and you don't get any interest rate in your savings account right now, it doesn't really matter because you have an iPhone, right? So they do these things with inflation numbers and all these kinds of other ways of, shall we say, expressing the health of the economy to the layperson, right?
Right.
So they have these
Make it
numbers and
easy.
ways of expressing the health of the economy to the layperson. Obviously, it's there's a whole bunch of fine print behind it. So this is not saying that they're lying to you. It's just saying
Right.
that, hey, if you want to be that person that at least understands what you're consuming, go back and notice that it's that 8.5%. It's either like 20% for some people or -5% for other people, because all they have is assets and they've been living that way for the past, they're the Rothschilds or whatever.
Right.
That kind of a thing. But I don't know. What do you think about that whole thing, that actually they do reduce certain things in there, the hedonic adjustments that they make year over year to make it such that, you know what, you don't have any money, but you have an iPhone.
Right.
You have information. You have the internet. Is that fair?
Right.
or
Yeah.
what do you
I think to some degree, what you said it best. They're finding a way to present this to the layman. Just, hey, okay, we're gonna make it easy for you. This is the rate right now. This is where we're at, and they pick some things that are just relatable terms to the rest of us. But of course, you and I and anyone that starts to pay attention, and we can start asking those questions. Okay, under how is this measured? Okay, whose scale, and as you mentioned as well earlier, your the money that you're making, your income can may or may not even speak to that. I gave an example of myself earlier. I sit in a room and everyone's talking about how high gas prices are, and I'm like, well, I just charged my car at home, so I don't really know. So I think that's just a way for us to pay attention to what's going on in the economy and really start to make some decisions, which I believe is spoken about in this video. Is how can you say, okay, well, I don't want to be a part of this, right? I just want to be, I want to, I want to eat my lentils and buy my groceries on a daily or as needed basis. So I think this is it's more of a pay attention to what's going on, right? Start to look at your money differently and start to find ways to use your assets, money making abilities, to stay above the curve, right? Because ultimately, if you're just working a 9 to 5 and your boss didn't give you a raise, your monthly paycheck didn't go up, you're starting to feel the pinch. So I think it's just a way to get our attention. Really, that's my take on it.
Yeah, exactly. You talk about the raise, for example, the typical kind of just raise year over year, just because, just to keep up with inflation.
Mm-hmm.
People get like 3% or something like that, right?
Right.
If you just work in the same job, and inflation here, for this basket of goods, it's 8.5%, right? So that's you went backwards 5% by just working there, right? So thinking you got a raise and all that kind of stuff. Hence, you're talking about the fact that you mentioned 9 to 5. It highlights the fact that 9 to 5 is a kind of a limitation, and I believe this also strongly. The 9 to 5 is a limitation on as your one asset. It's as your one kind of source of money, if you will, because it doesn't allow you to get these other assets, for example, that inflate, okay, nicely, like property and whatever. And it doesn't. Unfortunately, more people have to act like entrepreneurs. When I say act like, I don't believe all of a sudden everyone is going to become more entrepreneurial because that's not, it's a psychological type.
Yeah, it
right?
doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. But I think that with technology, you can act like it more, right? So that with technology, you can actually outsource work to people in Indonesia more without actually being like this business guy with all this, taking all this kinds of risks.
An email and a cell phone.
Exactly. So the barrier to entry has gone down a lot, and the necessity to get in there is highly needed, given the facts that we see before us. The necessity to actually participate in the global market, to participate in globalization, is there. Now, you're not the first mover. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the corporations already started doing it. Apple making their phones in China, for example, making billions of dollars. But the idea is the market that there's still a chance for you to catch a little bit of the waves. Okay, given the technology now that's open to you, you don't have to be an Apple. But the reason Apple did it and everybody else did it is because, it's obvious why that they did it. It has nothing. They don't care about. It's not about the jobs left the United States. Okay, and they're not coming back. Okay. So it's not a question of you sitting here with your hands folded. It's like, no, this is the way it's going. That's the wave. And now it is opened up to you because of technology. As an individual, you can hop in, get that LLC, maybe do the tax. We'll talk about tax ways of kind of getting of saving more money, for example. We could, which is basically getting it more, being more of a business than an individual.
Yeah, I think I still the mentality remains the challenge for a lot of people, because I think when you, and we talked about this on this channel before, when you talk about starting a business, a lot of people go blank. A lot of people just, someone put here in the chat here, that we tend to rely on 9 to 5, as our only source. That's because that's what people are taught. That's the goal is go to school, get a job, pay your bills, work hard, and die, and your children will continue that process. But when we start to stimulate the minds of the people saying, hey, you can do that on the side, or eventually what you're doing on the side could be your primary source of income, and your 9 to 5, you're doing 9 to 5 more on a project basis. Okay, maybe you're trying to gain some knowledge or expose yourself to corporate America to learn some strategic ways of doing things differently, or expand your network base, or etc. But we've talked about this before, that mentality, understanding that the moment you can solve a problem that's in society, I am solving a problem. The 9 to 5 we're all working for, they're solving a problem, they're meeting a need in the society. So the moment we can bring that mentality and identify the problem and choose to become problem solvers, then we really can start our entrepreneur mindset and expand that, bigger than, we believe we can. But we have to first identify the problem. But that's another story. But I think that the having multiple income streams, income sources, in addition to a 9 to 5, is really one of the keys for a lot of people. And that opportunity is only growing with some of the tools that you mentioned, having, technology, being able to outsource work to Indonesia, India, China, you name it. Of course, my favorite place to outsource is India, because they are the most loyal. And the Philippines, they're loyal too. But, shout out to the Filipinos out there and Indians.
All right. Globalize or die is the way I put it. That's going to be a campaign of mine.
That's right.
It's globalize or die. And in the past, it was modernize or die. Basically saying that, look, the same old, let's say, just call them corporations, but back then you would call them these colonial whatever, right? But then the East England Dutch company, whatever it is, the East India Dutch company, which was actually a corporation by the Dutch, was the arm that got out there and did that colonization. But what's my point? My point is, at that point, it was modernize or die. In other words, they're going to show up with tanks, it was ships back then, ships built with steel and guns and gunpowder and a well-trained officer corps, and the native populations of the world, right, that were encountered by this ship machine, by the English and the Dutch or whatever. The question was, modernize or die, and we saw how that played out in the 20th century, right? China got licked a few times, got beat, and now they were like, hey, we have to modernize, and then they went. Same thing with Russia. Russia took a good swing at it. Japan also. Japan rose up and up to the point where they were actually challenging. They came in and like, hey, let's partner up with Germany or whatever. But then they got knocked down, and then they answered the call, modernize. Today, the sweep is globalized. Okay, so it's been modernized, and what does that mean? Modernize is you create all this technology.
Technology, right?
Globalization is the spreading of technology.
Right.
Globalization says, okay, I have built the typewriter. Okay, now how do I build 1 million typewriters, take it to Bangladesh and take it to Indonesia and take it to all these other places, right? How do I spread this technology? Technology takes you from 0 to 1. Shout out to Peter Thiel, right? So it didn't exist before, and boom, here's your first typewriter. And then globalization is the process of going from 1 typewriter to 1 billion typewriters. So now we have that phase of 1 typewriter to 1 billion typewriters. Okay, the first movers already made their moves, which is these corporations and whatnot. But you have no choice in this matter, right? You gotta get in with this flow, just like they had no choice. It was the modernize or die time. But anyways, let us continue.
Yes.
Anywhere in the world you go, the average person makes a lot less than $300,000. Here's how to deal. Number 1, take the bus. Number 2, don't buy in bulk. Number 3, try lentils instead of meat. Number 4, nobody said this would be fun. This is perhaps the most out there take, where the Western media is just saying, hey, you got to deal with it. And we've been talking about what would be the consequences of printing all this money. What would be the consequences of racking up debt? How many times more debt do you need to get through the last couple of years than you did to win World War II? Well, go and ask the US Congress, go and ask governments all around the world who, in many ways, left their citizens feeling abandoned, locked out of their own countries or trapped inside them, but yet spent record sums of money inefficiently, printed money. And now we have runaway inflation. And so what does the Western media say? Let's take this bit by bit. And I'm going to tell you what I would do about it. Take the bus. Hey, listen, I could afford a car. I have homes around the world. I could afford a car in each home. I don't really want a car. It's a hassle. But is my suggestion, take the bus? You're probably not going to see me on a bus anytime soon. You'll see me walking. You'll see me out and about. Maybe I'll be in an Uber. But take the bus. Hey, I guess they'd like you to do that. That's the politician's plan, get you on a bus. That's number one. Number two, don't buy in bulk, which doesn't make.
Well, what do you think about the bus idea, though? I mean, I think it's kind of very silly, but go ahead.
It's very silly. Okay, so let's role play here. So in my neighborhood, there are roughly about 250 homes, and let us just all decide we're going to park our cars and take the bus. Okay, and somehow, on Monday morning, the last time I seen an Omnitrans bus, I think it has a maximum capacity about 92 people. so let's just say that we all lined up, we're taking the bus. So, and we know that the bus is not coming to our neighborhood empty. So just looking at that in itself, it's the silliest idea. But I think that, you know, if you step back, the bus is controlled by the government. So it's in a way it's saying, give us your money. Give us your money in another way. We're gonna charge you. And I don't know who's been checking. The last time I checked, actually the train station, it's actually cheaper to put gas in your car to some extent.
Yeah, especially the train. Yeah, I used the train to I did the train thing for my master's degree. The train happened to have a stop right at the college, at the school. Okay, Cal State Los Angeles, right? So it was a little convenient in a certain sense, but it didn't. It was right there with gas,
right?
And this was back then. But I'm sure now. But anyway, I'm sure it's a lot more expensive now. But because back then it wasn't cheap. The train is never that train. Yeah, Metro Link or whatever they call it.
Yeah, it's a big misconception. It's. I remember I was planning a trip with my family to go out to the East Coast, and we wanted to take the train from Virginia to New York, and just going through the numbers, it was like, you know what? It's going to be much more convenient and more cost effective to rent a car and pay the tolls and drive. And also time, just the time. The other day, my son was at a basketball game, and I was trying to see if I get him to take the bus. It was going to be an hour and 57 minutes for a 28-mile, destination. So our system. Maybe if we're in a place like New York, okay, where we say public transportation in New York, like the trains, they're every 15 minutes, every 5 minutes. But in my neighborhood, by 7 p.m., there's no more bus. And if I have to catch a bus, I actually have to walk about 3 miles. The bus doesn't even come this way. So that is such a far-fetched, I don't really care what you're thinking approach.
One might push back and say, okay, cool, that's an infrastructure problem. Maybe that just highlights the fact that your city, municipality, your state is not well run, and you should deal with your local politicians. But however, the bus is the better solution. Hey, look at Europe. Everything, by the way, is very European in its outlook vis-a-vis the advice that was given, right? It's not buying in bulk and this kind of a bus thing and whatnot.
Totally Europe. Yeah.
So one thing I could say here, and I could bring in the tax issue as well, is D is talking about the depreciation of the car. Is a car an asset? How far does it depreciate versus what it gives you as a, if it's obviously if you're running like an ambulance company, then the car is the asset. You kind of need it. Okay. Right. But here is my move in terms of making that car more of an asset to you is to start an LLC. I don't know if you have to join a multi-level marketing company out there and then start an LLC, right? if or everybody these days, especially if you have a certain level of skill, you can create a legitimate business out of it and start this LLC, and then your car expenses can then be part of the write-off.
Right.
Yeah. So that's how to get now. Obviously, in order to get to the level where you are able to, here's what I'm saying. Money has different frequencies. That's silly. What I mean by that is you have your cyclical money, month-to-month money, your monthly nut, right?
Right.
That's a frequency, okay? So you need that needs to come in and go out, blah, blah, blah. And then the things such as taxes, which happens, let's say, once a year, okay?
Right.
Now, if you not everybody can think yearly with their money, right? Because they're stuck on the
9 to 5, the bills and the frequencies that
the bills that we call it living paycheck to paycheck. They're stuck on their recurring payments. Okay, These recurring, it's kind of like revolving credit, almost like they're just stuck on that revolving one. But the point is, money needs to always be divided. And I know I'm mentioning several principles here as we go along, but the first principle was about taxes. Form that LLC, get some of these things that you consider normal expenses, like your cars, get it into asset status somewhat by them being deductible. Okay.
Right.
And then I say that in order to do this, you need to build yourself up to the level where you have the nice little recurring monthly money going, and then you start building yearly type money, right? And also maybe 10-year type plans of, okay, in 10 years, I want to have this much money because I want, I don't know, that land over there or this boat over here or whatever, right? These are all different frequencies of money. And you should always have those simultaneously going on. Never look at your money as one pile. It's one of the rules that I have. Like, never look at your money as one
and lay
pile.
all the eggs in one basket, right?
You can't be like, oh, this is how much money I have. Never. No, don't do that. Now, obviously, you want to keep track of your money and know exactly how much you have. But what I mean is psychologically, there need to be divisions. Okay?
Right.
There needs to be the money that I'm going to be putting in this particular, I'm dollar cost averaging into Coinbase right now. I'm staking my Ethereum so that in 10 years, I'll be able to do X. That's one particular money. It's from now to 10 years. There's my regular monthly nut, if you will, which is the payment for the car and the, let's say, house and the utilities. Okay. And I try to keep that low. I try to keep whatever flow that is required to keep that going. I keep that going. Whatever asset is paying for that, whatever job is paying for that, I organize that level of money. I'm always looking at that as separate. And then there's this, let's say, retirement money I'm putting into 401k funds, 10% of it. That's a different pile of money. And then you have in your disposable income, even you start even creating even other things that maybe you hide away. Maybe you want to get into some riskier assets, such as $10 a week into some new crazy crypto project, okay, which could flip it crazy for you or win blah blah blah. That's another pile of money. So rather than look at, oh, I have $100,000, no, you can't look at it that way. It's got to be, there's the revolving, there's this other frequency, there's this other frequency, there's this other place. And that's just beginning financial literacy 101. And we know it instinctively too, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, what you said right there makes a lot of sense. And what I'm hearing is somebody that's taking the time to understand money and your approach to money and your mentality with money is really different. And I know that you speak about that a lot on this channel and how we can take that concept and broaden it and make it something that's a daily conversation. Because there's some people right now, what you just said, that just goes right over their head, right? I look at money in the same way, but my spouse doesn't, and how we can start to make that a regular conversation in many homes and in societies. I think it's the goal, because we just have this idea that we work to get money, we use money to buy things that we need and want, and we save it as best as we can so we can use it to buy things that we want later, or we save it so that we can be sure that we can use it to buy things that we want later, or give it to people to buy things that they want later. So our mentality and approach towards money needs to change.
Indeed. Let's continue here. And the bus goes on. And I like how Mr. Henderson flexes on you guys. It's like, well, I have multiple homes in multiple countries, and I could afford multiple cars.
He did say that.
What does the Western media say? Let's take this bit by bit, and I'm going to tell you what I would do about it. Take the bus. Hey, listen, I could afford a car. I have homes around the world. I could afford a car in each home. I don't really want a car. It's a hassle. But is my suggestion, take the bus? You're probably not going to see me on a bus anytime soon. You'll see me walking. You'll see me out and about. Maybe I'll be in an Uber, but take the bus. Hey, I guess they'd like you to do that. That's the politician's plan, get you on a bus. That's number one. Number two, don't buy in bulk, which doesn't make sense to me in the sense of if you can buy a non-perishable item, whether it's toilet paper or tuna fish or corn in a can or whatever, why wouldn't you want to stock up, especially if you're in the United States, which I think this is speaking to, where you probably have the extra space to put the stuff. Why wouldn't you want to buy assets that are only going to keep going up in price, which of course they're blaming on the very unfortunate war that's going on in Ukraine, as if this stuff wasn't already percolating under the surface long before. Maybe that had a little bit of an effect, but if this was already coming, don't buy in bulk. I don't understand that. Maybe someone in the comment section can correct me on why you shouldn't buy in bulk, unless you're in one of those cage houses in Hong Kong where you just don't have room to store stuff. Why wouldn't you? Number three, try lentils instead of meat. Hey, listen, maybe you want to try more lentils. I'm trying to eat more vegetables. I'm trying to be healthier, but this is the new future. They want you to eat more lentils instead of meat. And oh, by the way, life sucks. Get used to it. That's what they're telling you to do. Now, obviously, we work with folks who have high net worths, who have high incomes. And so it's easier for our clientele to deal with this. But it doesn't mean it doesn't sting. Now, one thing that I have said is, if you have a certain amount of income, I don't care if you're running a business, I don't care if you have a portfolio of fixed income, or you have dividends or whatever it is, or you have certain, cryptocurrency staking or whatever it is where you've got a certain income every year. That income is going to go a lot further. Number one, you reduce the tax rate that you're paying. So if you move to a number of tax-friendly countries around the world, they don't have to be tax havens like the UAE or Cayman Islands or Monaco, or countries that are.
So this is interesting. Obviously, now he's going into his particular set of solutions that are in line with his particular business, right?
Right.
But let's as a challenge, okay? Because we're all about we talked earlier about people kind of stretching beyond what's comfortable for them and then doing things such as getting lentils or getting into assets. Now, for me, even though I do some stuff internationally, it's kind of interesting, but I still look at his aspect, the way he looks at things, as a stretch for me. That's why that's why I listen to him, right? So I do have employees in Africa, for example, and one in Budapest, right? So I do have the international thing going on in that regard. Some international stuff in Africa in terms of land, property, blah blah blah. But I'm also an immigrant, so that's not so crazy in terms of that would happen. But his idea of, hey, registering your business in some other country, for example, and getting other kinds of residencies, other chunks of monies and different currencies. For me, that is like the next frontier. That's what I want to do.
Right.
I want to have multiple passports. But what does that sound to you? Is that a stretch too for you? Does it sound?
It is a
reasonable?
stretch, but it's
Okay.
there's a level of excitement when as I listen to him, speak. And yes, let's say you I think he says you can buy property, and there's some properties that are X amount of money, and it starts hitting me like, wait a second, he's actually dropping some gems in that. What if I went that far? What if I could go to a place in Europe and say, hey, these are my people, this is my property, this is my home, and start to really expand my spending power and presence in another country in small increments. I find that really interesting. And also the idea to travel and be more, like you said, global, to be more global. I find that actually interesting. It is something that I look at. I'm looking at it from the first floor, looking up to the 7th floor right now. But it's definitely something to look forward to, and something that I could see myself doing as I start to look at my money and spread it out. And I think the key thing is to be comfortable, being comfortable to do that. We often, we've talked about this before in one of our previous casts, that once money leaves, when you're spending in the United States, there's a certain level of, okay, I know that the laws, I know everything. But the moment you go outside, then you're dealing with cultures and trust issues and things like that. And that is something that I think it takes time to build.
Yeah, and for me, having an advantage, for example, right? Let's say, as an immigrant, there's always a part of the world that I can always go to and kind of semi blend in and semi get it and semi play whatever my particular game is.
Right.
Over there.
You have that muscle exercised.
Yeah. So, but overall, what I can tell is, in small increments, okay, what has happened, even locally in the United States, is the more I move, the more I incorporate new territory. In other words, because I moved all through Southern California, for example. So when I moved all the way from San Bernardino, I lived from San Bernardino all the way to San Pedro, right? And everywhere in between, and Orange County and everywhere, right? The more I did that, the more I just kind of looked at all that as my domain, okay?
Okay.
And then when I moved to Northern California, okay, I'm like, I don't feel like I left Southern California. I just feel like now this is now I just operate in a bigger domain. And also Oregon and Washington has been added to my domain because I do business all through the West Coast. And then when I started going to Africa, which by the way, I'm going in a couple of weeks again, okay, and spending time there a couple months. Now it's just like, okay, that's just part of, like, I don't feel
it's an
constrained.
extension.
It's just an extension now of where I can. Now, obviously, there's a limit to where some people can go with that.
Right. Given your passport, right?
And also your personality, right?
Right.
But I'm saying that there's a level of increase that you haven't found your limit yet, because I know from experience that some people are just like, oh, I don't want to, I want to move back to, they have to be in New Mexico because that's where their grandma is and that kind of stuff. So for me, my personality is, what do you mean? Like, I don't even understand that. I'm very, that's
well, you've been on the move then, so you're used to it. There are a lot of people that's a big request to relocate that often and to those many places in a short lifespan.
Yes. So let's continue with this. And Mr. Henderson here is saying, hey, you can get tax incentives and blah blah blah. All those rich people over there in the Cayman Islands and whatnot in the Caribbean, they're there for a reason.
They're obviously very expensive, and it may need to import a lot of things, right? And that may increase the cost, and that may make it more difficult for them. But there are plenty of tax-friendly countries in Southeast Asia, in Central America, in parts of Europe, where you can go and they grow their own food. And hey, you can get a place. There's places in Eastern Europe. You can buy a house in a village an hour from the capital for 10, 15, 20,000 euros. I probably wouldn't want to.
And that's the thing. I mean, just think about that, right? Just think about what he just said. An hour from, let's say, the capital of some somewhat Central European, not necessarily Eastern European. Maybe you're over in, let's just say Hungary, Budapest, something like that, and you get for 15,000 euros, let's just say that's $30,000 or whatever, right? You can cop a nice property. It's probably nice, got these nice hills and historic winding roads, and you're like, hey.
I mean, that in Central America, and you probably have difficulty doing that for a number of.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, when I visited Europe in 2015, I did a tour where my wife and I took a bus and we drove from France all the way to I think we went to Germany, or when we had a chance to stop at a few places, and there are places that you get to and you're looking at it going that, wait, is this the same Europe? I mean, the houses are smaller, the people don't look like the ones you see on TV. Things really start to change. And I like the fact that he talked about Eastern Europe, because it always seems like the West is always the focal, is always the attention, given that, whenever we travel, we typically land west. If, depending on where you're coming from, everything seems to be, if you're from the US, you're going west. But yeah, that's a gem that he dropped there, going to the east, where you have more of the smaller homes, the homes that they'll film some movies where it looks like, what part of the world is this? Even looking at this right now, it reminds me of some places in Africa. So yeah, good point.
Reasons in Southeast Asia, but that's just one possibility. You can grow your own food, or you can live in any of these places, lower your tax rate, and just rely on the local supply chain, which is perhaps more connected than some of the traditional tax havens. So if you reduce your tax rate, you're going to have obviously more money. And I've always said water seeks its own level. Why is it that even if you make $300,000, why is it most folks who make $300,000 don't really save much? Maybe they're kind of pushed to put money into a retirement kind of work where, hey, all right, check the box, 6% goes in, whatever, fine. But most people who make that kind of income, you could spend on a higher mortgage payment, car leases, they go on nice vacations, kids go to private schools. And oh, by the way, whatever's left just so happens to be the amount of tax they have to pay. Right? Water seeks its own level. When you make the conscious decision to go to a new country, you get to decide where your money goes, because let's just say.
Right. So basically saying it's a way of effectively battling that whole thing where, as your income goes up, your expenses tends to go up as well.
Yep.
But if you make a conscious effort to be like, hey, I'm going to go live over here as opposed to living over there. Like, for example, picture this, for example, okay? You are living in, I don't know, there's some part of Malaysia. Okay. It's a safe country or whatever. Pick a nice, safe, relatively inexpensive. Let's say Georgia. There's a country called Georgia, right? It's kind of close to the Middle East, but it's also kind of like Central European, whatever. That's where Joseph Stalin was from, right away. Okay. So there's a country called Georgia, and you can live there, for example, in, let's say, the rural parts of Georgia, and you have this nice spread. Okay, got internet and everything. You got this great land, massive, because it's cheap, right? So for what you're paying, let's say you came from California, right? But you actually have, let's say, a house in Boston, like this tiny little condo. You wouldn't necessarily live in it, but it's generating you income. It's an asset, and actually is appreciating. You maybe even be renting, okay, in Budapest or whatever country that we decide you're going to be in, okay? Or Georgia. You may be renting in Georgia, but the rent is so cheap that you can even have homes in, let's say, the West, okay, in the United States, but you don't have to even live there.
Right.
This is the kind of this is like an idea, or a particular arrangement that one could see or use when you're talking about mitigating your tax and your expenses and all this international thing, right? So it's like, why do you have to live in the West? Even if you own property in the West, why do you have to stay in a tiny little condo in Boston, which costs a lot of money to have? But why don't you just have that pay you money?
Right.
While you're
have it work for you instead.
You're living in a paradise on the hill in Bali or something for a fraction of the cost, and you're still able to work because you got internet, you got all these other things going on.
It's like something I said last time when I was in Cameroon for $50 a night or 2 nights, or I think it was $75 for 2 nights. We had the beach to ourselves, the whole beach. So there are these opportunities when you go out of the country to live a larger or scaled life, where you're picking and choosing your finances.
Indeed.
Say you make the number $300,000. If you're paying $100,000 in taxes and you can reduce that to $30,000, $15,000, zero in some cases, then you've got all that extra money. Hey, that can pay for a lot of inflation. On top of that, if you go to a country where things are less expensive, I'm not talking that you want to go to some place that's truly a frontier economy where your lifestyle is going to be disrupted, but you can live in, again, parts of Eastern Europe. Look at Serbia, for example. We've got a lot of people who want more personal freedom who are going to Serbia. They're not on the euro, and so things are pretty darn affordable there. Even parts of the EU, Poland, for example, without the euro, things are much more affordable than in places that have the euro. And so when people say, hey, Montenegro, well, Montenegro's on the euro. I've never found it to be cheap.
So people in this space on YouTube know O'Shea Duke Jackson. Okay, O'Shea Duke Jackson, or Dr. Jackson, is an example of someone who went to Poland. Okay, this is a African-American from Sacramento. Okay, over here in Northern California, if you will, or the Bay Area, kind of close to the Bay Area. And he went to school in Poland, okay, for his medical degree, and also runs his YouTube business operation in Uganda. Okay, so he is able to he's an example, or that people can kind of actually look at, because a lot of people are subscribed to his channel that also are subscribed to mine, right? And I'm going to be having an interview with him shortly, coming up soon. Okay, but he is an example of that person that's, hey, I'm going to go get my degree over here in Poland, and I can live in a particular kind of lifestyle, and I have a business running through in Uganda. Joanita Maya is my business manager. She takes care of that. And I come to the United States sometimes. So here's an example of an individual, okay, that doesn't have, a horn coming out of his head. So I'm like, oh my God, but O'Shea is a genius, okay? No shade to O'Shea, but, he's smart enough to get a medical degree, but he's not like some kind of crazy entrepreneurial genius that can be like, oh yeah, it's easy for him to do that. He's just a regular guy out there doing his thing, going where the opportunities were. Okay, cool. It's easy to get into certain kinds of programs in Eastern Europe. A lot of Africans tend to do it in terms of education. You write a particular exam, you get into a university in Hungary, boom, you got that done. Anyways, let's continue. Never thought of Serbia before, but yeah, sure, why not?
Right.
But Serbia is pretty inexpensive. You can look all around the Balkans. You can look at a country like Georgia. You can look at a country like Armenia. You can look at countries in Central America, Mexico at the peso. Many of the Central American countries. People are talking in the crypto community about the Bitcoin community about El Salvador. You can look at places like Nicaragua. We've had people going. Costa Rica, a bit more developed. Panama on the dollars. That's not going to be as cheap. You're not going to find the bargains there. Look in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Malaysia. Am I seeing inflation where I go? I am. But instead of paying 35 cents for a really nice bottle of sparkling water in Georgia, now I'm paying 50 cents. And by the way, in some of these countries, you've seen some currency declines where you might have 5 or 10% more purchasing power. Colombia is another example, not particularly tax-friendly for full-time living, but you've got lots of opportunities.
This is another thing that she just mentioned. Okay, the thing is, you actually sometimes it benefits you when you operate in two currencies. You notice this,
of course.
Like, for example, I have this deal in Ghana. Okay. Or you buy a car and you loan it out to somebody, they're doing
Uber.
They're doing Uber with it, and then they're paying you money, and you are making interest obviously on that. I've seen, okay, because of the change, 6 Ghana cedis to $1, and then it goes up to 7, and then boom, all of a sudden the car prices for my dollar, if I want to, boom, now $6,000 buys a lot more car, if you will. than it used to before. So, but over here in the United States, dealing in just one country, you don't get to take advantage of these kinds of arbitrage, right? That kind of happen.
Yeah, because the dollar is always the dollar.
Dollar is always the dollar here, and it doesn't. But all of a sudden, if you're dealing somewhere else, all of a sudden, when your dollar just all of a sudden randomly increases in value, right?
Right,
It's a nice thing.
It increases your purchasing power.
Exactly. So let's continue here, Mr. Henderson.
Latin America, Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, probably some of the best ones. But again, Portugal, Poland, other countries in Europe could also be interesting. If you reduce your cost of living and live in a place where you still have a similar level of development, okay? Living in Malaysia, living in Costa Rica, you're not going to have Amazon Prime coming to your door, but you're going to be able to weather inflation better because your money is going to go further. And you can potentially eliminate or at least dramatically reduce the amount of taxes that you're paying. And so if you don't want to take the bus, now listen, you go to Malaysia, you go to Thailand, cars are going to cost more. But again, in some of these countries, you could go and buy a property. If you want the ability to grow your own food and protect yourself against future inflation, at least on some of the general stuff, the vegetables or whatever. Heck, I've been in.
What do you think about prepping, being a prepper? Now, there's definitely crazy levels to it. Like you have a bunker and you have this commando outfit with a crazy knife and a Rambo gear that you've got waiting for Armageddon to happen. That's one level. Another level is maybe you have some food or some water stashed. What are your thoughts as far as being a prepper? Now, let's say if you live in Nigeria, that's kind of goes with the territory. You're gonna have like a generator. You're gonna have a way of kind of getting water and keeping water, certain other kinds of things like that. But living in the United States, okay, which is again, them telling you to not buy in bulk, for example, is opposite of the prep mentality, if you will. Right. So what do you have to say about the whole where are you on the prep spectrum? Because I think one of these weeks we should review like a video from a prepper channel.
I agree. For prepping, I think it really depends on where you are in your life. There are some people that have children, pets, and their mom and dad living with them, and they're responsible for their kids, and both work and have an income, and they're doing everything to support their parents living with them, their pets. So their prepping approach is going to be different, and also the age of the kids can affect the prepping, and so I think that to each his own is going to be a little bit different. But for me, I think I was never one to buy a bunch of toilet paper and all that stuff during the pandemic. I never once thought our society won't provide eggs. I never paid more for eggs than I needed to. I didn't stock up extra on toilet paper or bacon and anything else. I just had a regular life. I remember leaving during the pandemic, and coming back and my wife telling me to disinfect because there was this belief that the moment you stepped outside of the house, you came back infected. This was prior to the vaccine. This was like March of 2020, where we didn't know a clue of what was going on. So for me, I think that I have a couple of properties. I had money in the bank. I have my children, which are the oldest is 12 and the youngest is 5. I think that my approach was, when we are done running out what we have now, we will go to the store and get it, and it has worked for me, right? But I think, like I mentioned, there's some people's, their fear level was different. I bought the same stuff that I normally bought. I followed my regular route and routines, and all I kept saying to myself, if we got to the level where jobs are closed indefinitely, I've got a couple properties that would make a good sale, because right now we all know that, I don't know if you've been paying attention to real estate, for the first time ever, we don't have enough property to sell. So but yeah, the prep, I was not one of those I'm gonna go to my garage every Friday, every Tuesday afternoon and say, yes, I've got I'm ready for a month. No, I just kind of took a regular life.
Gotcha. Maybe we'll slowly turn you into a prepper. Obviously with regards to different ends, such as disaster type ends, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, you could start going down the line, life insurance,
or even like, you're responsible for children. How about a particularly big earthquake, or some other kind of disaster? The power grid gets hit by Russia.
Yeah, well, having to that regard, I live in Fontana, which is known for being extremely windy, North Fontana. And I did get a generator, and in terms of that, because the reason why, and this might sound is I hated the fact that when we would have a power outage, my neighbors would turn on their generators and they're making all this noise and I couldn't sleep. So that was actually why I got one. So I was like, well, I got mine too. Let's go. But yeah, I that maybe if you were having this conversation with my wife, she might, tell you, more about prepping and how her approach to it is. I'm more of the laid back approach, but I can use a little fire under my belly to
I have nothing stashed. Okay. However, I kind of look at certain kinds of things. Being a loner type, generally speaking, kind of puts that in your mind as well, where you're like, okay, let's say if I was in the wilderness somewhere for a while, what would I need? Let's say this backpack, one backpack, okay, what would be in it? And in the back of my car, what will be there? Obviously, a few gallons of water is typically number one. Number one. Okay.
Yeah, you gotta have some water.
I don't know how many weeks you could go without food, but you can go for a while without food. Okay.
Right.
You got that water in there. Okay. So you got this water and a nice source of fat and carbs, and then maybe some few essentials in this backpack. It's something that's always kind of been in the back of my mind, just because there's, when it comes to, shall we say, risk mitigation, one factor is the likelihood of something happening, right? Which is, okay, there's a 5% chance it'll happen. But then the other factor is, the other chance is, what are we talking about? Okay, if it's 5% chance of death, then, okay, so even if it's only 5%, you do something about it, okay?
Right, yeah, you got 5% chance 5%.
5% chance of slight inconvenience, you ignore, right? 5% chance of death, you pay attention to. So 5% chance of everything going to hell, let's say, or 1% chance, but better. You don't want to be in that situation where you're like, oh my God, why didn't I get the freaking water? Because that's a bad place. That's a bad day.
Yeah, that's you're screwed on that one.
You're like, oh my God, I didn't get the water. Why did I get the freaking water? Anyways.
Places in Eastern Europe where they have chickens running around, you bring your animals. How self-sufficient do you want to be? You can do that, and you can take your property in the US or in Canada or in anywhere else in the world where it's gone through the roof. Signs are perhaps those prices won't stay high forever. You can sell that property, take all the equity out, potentially do so tax-free if it's your primary residence in some countries, and then put that into a property that you pay cash for. Oh, by the way, now you reduced another expense. Not only did you reduce taxes, not only did you reduce your general cost of living, but potentially you can just eliminate your entire mortgage expense. And now, even if you don't make $300,000, the number that they start to call, hey, okay, this is when you can start to survive it. Now you can start to survive at $100,000. I mean, who knows what it is? Obviously, most people in Malaysia or Costa Rica or anything else don't make close to $100,000. And so while we see these price raises around the world, I think they're particularly hurting the West because people have had such small margins and they're really not self-sufficient in many ways. And they have all their money going out in terms of different consumer debts that you don't have in every country around the world. By the way, I think this could lead to some real chaos. I mean, what I said 20 years ago when the Iraq war started was, there were a number of people who were against it. And I said, listen, if people's gas prices go high enough, and you're seeing that right now with inflation, people are they're going to advocate for whatever it takes to get those gas prices down. Who cares what you got to do? And by the way, some of that might spill over into some kind of chaos domestically. I think that you've got some countries in the West that are really on a short fuse. And so if I'm worried about my personal safety, if I'm worried about my financial safety in terms of just tax the rich, who cares how much they're paying? I'm tired of inflation, just rises through the roof. If you don't want to be part of a war that's going to come up because hey, we've got to fight inflation, go take their oil over there. I mean, some of these things could be a little bit far-fetched. But what happens when people are pushed to the brink, when people are used to cheap goods and services, especially in the United States? What happens when they are not ready for this? You're going to see some unforeseen consequences. I'm going to want a place at least where I can get out as a plane.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice footage here. It's like, you're going to see, it shows a couple dudes with guns. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start landing the plane, approaching that time, okay? Approaching that time here. But they say you should eat some lentils. It's not going to be easy. Take the bus and don't buy in bulk. We're going to need to Europeanize things a little bit. And maybe there's a statement also that's out there that says, in 25 years, you're not going to own anything and you'll be happy, right? And many people rail against that statement, saying, oh my God, this is horrible. They're going to take everything away. But really, it's just an argument for a particular position. There's a position which says, if we were to live like noble savages, sharing everything, that it'll be beautiful, right? So it's not like a new thing, right? The idea of, you will own nothing and you'll be happy. It's like, okay, if you actually do believe that, well, that is the utopia that you're going after. But So I don't get all like crazy when some elites, if you will, say stuff like that. It's okay. Well, okay, sure. You know, that's a fair argument. Let's see. But whenever it's been tried, whenever this kind of thing has been tried, it's always a little crazy. Well, let me do a little quick recap, and then I guess I'll make an attempt at a recap, and then I guess we'll have a last word here. Again, 8.5% inflation as of April 2022.
That's
Basically,
right.
the sharpest increase since 1981. Exactly. And okay, we, in order to understand what this is, we talk about what money is. Money solves that problem called the double coincidence of wants. Go back to the beginning of the stream if you want to see the money story and how it comes about. And then currency is a way of making money liquid, making it such that I don't have to carry gold around and shave it. I'll just have this piece of paper that I'll use. Okay. Right. And then fiat currency is that can just be centrally controlled. That's by a central bank. They can just issue new gold. At that point, it's no longer money. It's now currency, and it's fiat currency. That's right. the difference. We call dollars money, but really money will be value, something like gold or something like the actual value. That's money. And this is currency, and in particular, fiat currency. Okay, so we kind of understand that, okay, built into fiat currency is the fact that they're going to print this stuff, but they're going to print it, give it to certain people whom are on the lower 50% of the economic ladder. But then a couple years down the line, the money that they gave to these people gets inflated away into the assets of the rich. Okay, so it's kind of a crazy little scheme. Like, oh, let's print all this money, give it to people, thereby
make the rich richer.
Make the rich richer, because the inflation, when it inevitably happens, is going to be an inflation of assets. And who owns assets? The rich. Okay, those $300,000 and over people that he was talking about, those people are people that own assets. So it's this kind of a crazy tax, this kind of a theft, as Mr. Breedlove, I believe his name was, the first person we played, was talking about, saying, you know, it is a theft. It's a kind of a backdoor technological hack, you know, stealing the people's value, if you will. And overall, I think the asset move is the biggest thing. And I'm saying, hey, you can grab assets internationally because you have to globalize or die, and that's where the things are relatively cheaper anyways. Matches with Andrew Henderson, the nomad capitalists' point of view as well, that go out there, get assets, or, you know, he added the tax aspect as well. Okay, and you can combine the tax and the asset aspect in terms of your homes, and also in terms of, let's say, your car. Get that LLC, make things certain kinds of write-off. But you want to go away from the fiat into the asset. If insofar as you're going to be in a situation where inflation exists, you want to be holding the asset, because that's what gets inflated. What are your closing thoughts, sir?
Yeah, I think we have to, what the video suggested with, you know, taking the bus and eating lentils and don't buy bulk, and you know, those are pretty much the three big ones. Everything else is falling around. I think the last thing you said, you know, this is going to be hard. I think we just have to be smart in how we manage and spend our money during these times. I think that's the key thing here is, you know, look to, you know, someone was talking about carpooling and things like that. There are other ways to manage these times, you know, whether it's carpooling, whether it's some days you take the train, maybe some days you know, ask your place of employment, is it possible for me to work from home? I know that some jobs, like, you know, working in a fast food chain, you can't really work from home. But I think looking at that, buying things in bulk, it remains a popular culture. But there are some things that maybe you don't buy in bulk, like noodle soup, or just paying attention to the economy and making sure that your money is doing more than, oh, I'm just paying more. You know, just the other day I went to the store and I noticed that the prices have gone up for things that, and they're not big the price jumps. Tea used to be $2.79, now it's $3.19. So those little things. So we just have to be, if you can't drink water, you know, I tell people, you don't have to drink juice, you know. So there are other ways that you could be smart about your money. And the key here is know that we are in a time where the debt of the United States is an all-time high because of all the extra money that was printed. And when we were getting those stimulus checks that, you know, when they were being deposited, everyone's happy and spending it, but we're seeing the domino effect right now. So just be smart about your money. Some of the things that in summary that he said in the video, if there's an opportunity to invest internationally, and even relocate to some other places. Like one of the things I'm thinking about doing is taking my business outside of California to a more tax-friendly place. Those are things to try. But if you can't stand the heat, then do something about it. It's not going to be easy, but you can do something about it. I think that's the summary here. You can find a way to survive during the inflation. You can find a way to make the inflation work for you. You can find a way, or just sit down and, really start eating lentils and take the bus. I mean, you could do that. But I think that the whole goal is, ladies and gentlemen, is to be smart about your spending and find a way to make your money stretch, a little bit more. And one last thing I'll say is, using your increasing your purchasing power by spending money internationally, globalizing your business if you're a business owner, or even outsourcing some of your work. We talked about scaling, taking advantage of all these things that technology has made a lot easier for us. So those are my closing thoughts.
Very well put. Very well put. All right, we are out until next time, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe we'll catch you tomorrow for a MISC Friday, Master Your Subjective Consciousness Friday, and then we shall continue this conversation. Peace. Thanks for the support.
Yes, sir.
Click that like button as you go out. Okay. And subscribe, bell button twice.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking, with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make me get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make me get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make me get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.